Thank you very much. I hadn't expected to be given the honor of being allowed to ask the first question. I thought two absolutely fascinating presentations, and I can't think of two presentations that have raised as many important issues in such a short space of time. But I'd really like to focus on 2 points, if I may. The first is to hear more from Damien Collins about his idea that in some way breaking up the monopoly of Facebook, Twitter, these big American corporations, could turn them into entities that could be looked as national organizations rather than international organizations. The point being that these platforms are certainly publishers. There's no question about that. But you cannot deal with them as ordinary publishers because they're global and international. But if they could, in a sense, be nationalized, there would be an entity there that one could take to court, for example, if they produced extremist or other socially undesirable material. And we know, those of us who follow this question closely know the British government had been trying for a very long time, Sir Nigel Shinewall trying to convince the Americans to agree to some regulation. But I don't think Americans ever will. But if Facebook could be nationalized, so there could be an English company, a British company of Facebook, that might be an answer. And my second point really is the final point that Christos made. And I'm not going to make the cheap point about, he said vaccination was going very well in Greece. But of course, compared to the way that vaccination is going in the United Kingdom, I'm afraid it's not doing very well. A small percentage compared to the United Kingdom. But he talks about the need to have fast access to the latest electronic technology. And certainly the COVID crisis has illustrated the importance of that, because we're all speaking to everybody via Zoom and these platforms that don't work well. Why have we not heard any more about 5G? We know that our security community in the United Kingdom thought we should have 5G. President Trump screwed it up. Now he's gone because our security people said they were perfectly happy with 5G from Huawei. We've heard nothing more about 5G. We certainly heard nothing more about Huawei 5G. And politically at the moment, it's very hard to see how Huawei 5G could make it, although in many ways they're considered best. How can one press for 5G, which is a really important thing now? Thank you.
Two questions. First, Damien, and then Christos. Please answer.
Thank you. I'll come on to the main question, but just on Huawei, I don't think it's true that the security people were happy with Huawei. According to the Cabinet Office Oversight Board, which is largely made up of former security service people who were looking at them, they said that the existing infrastructure presented a cybersecurity risk to the country. It had been flagged to Huawei, and they had not only done nothing about it, they had no plan to correct it. So I think when you look at the, in the public domain records about the concerns raised about Huawei, then we should have been concerned about it. It was almost astonishing that it was allowed to get to that point for so long before something was done about it. But on the question you asked me about,
we have been working with them for 20 years. I mean,
well, I understand. Read what the Oversight Board said in their published report. I mean, it's pretty damning.
Well, you took evidence from people who were, in the view of some of us, I held no brief for China, for goodness sake. But the truth is that people like Kieran Martin, the National Cyber Security Centre, said they were perfectly happy to work with Huawei until President Trump made it impossible for them to do so. And the people you talked to in your committee were party against it. Okay, if Huawei is finished, who are we going to have? Where is 5G going to come from? And I think we need to have some clear guidance there.
Well, as they would say on the BBC, there are other providers. So, but as we back to your question about nationalising Facebook, I don't think you can. I don't think you need to. So Facebook, like other big tech companies, has to comply with the laws in the countries where it does business. That's why we've seen them now backing down in Australia and agreeing to do a deal over funding news. In Germany, they have to comply with the the hate speech laws online. So they have to take, they're legally responsible for removing content that doesn't comply with Germany's hate speech laws. They will, they are in discussions at the moment with Ofcom and the British government around the proposed legislation on online harm. So they have to do business in that way. I think what is missing is, and I think in some ways, you look at another complex international industry like banking, which is by no means a perfect industry, not one I'd normally pray in aid of, but we do manage to monitor sort of issues across borders within the banking sector, and we also have laws which help us do that. So America has its Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, we have the Bribery Act, and that means that an offence committed by a British national or a British company anywhere in the world can be prosecuted in a UK court. So could we not? And I think what we need is a kind of a very loose international agreement with around tech, which says that if you are a social media company and you allow activity to happen in Myanmar or the Philippines or Venezuela on your platform that would be illegal in your home country or illegal in Western countries, then you could still be prosecuted for that. And just because it's in a part of the world where you might think no one's looking, or there's a corrupt regime which is using your technology to do bad things, you cannot be blind to that. And you can't. It's not good enough for us to say that there's nothing we could do. So I think there is more that we could do there. In terms of competition law and the question, do we break them up? I think it's a question of maybe separation and regulation. I had a very interesting, I'll plug my podcast, IN2030, but I had a very interesting podcast with David Cicilline, who chairs the Congressional Antitrust Committee, and they produced a very good report, very good antitrust report on big tech in October. And it could be different solutions to different companies. So there is a legitimate question to say for companies like Amazon and to some extent Google, is it fair that you both provide the infrastructure for selling, but also you sell yourself? So Amazon creates products that it promotes to the detriment of other retailers on Amazon, as well as providing the infrastructure for people to find it. And therefore, is that an abuse of market power, or is that fair? When you have two companies that control 70 to 80% of the global display ad market, in the case of Google and Facebook, what transparency is there over those transactions? Are they ripping off advertisers with unfair fees? They exert abuse of market power because there's nowhere else to go. Is it fair for if you have an iPhone, you can only buy apps through the App Store, and Apple takes a 30% cut, but it charges some people a bit less. Is that fair? So these are the sorts of things that regulators are used to looking at. We've just not been really focused on the tech sector as much. And for too long, I think we've sort of believed what the tech sector told us, which is, well, actually, we're not monopolies. We're a series of companies competing against each other. Google is competing against Facebook and Amazon and Apple. Well, to some extent, but I think actually what you see more when you really look at their businesses is what they are as a series of businesses that have dominant market power in specific areas of technology that are all really important, and that it's almost impossible for new entrants to compete against them unless you are a Chinese company backed by the Chinese state. The idea of a business that was, and we saw this from papers that my committee published. If you're an app developer, you've probably got to be on Facebook to reach your audience. But that means that Facebook could do a number of things. They could say, well, if you want to have access to our data, you've got to give us all your data you get from our users. So we could easily launch a copy of what you do ourselves. Or if we think that you're too popular, we might just turn off your access to data, kill your business and launch one of our own. A lot of new entrants to the market have the sort of dilemma of, if their business succeeds, they'll either be acquired or destroyed by the company they have to live off. A tech investor in America said to me, it's for a lot of developers, new entrants in technology, it's a bit like, well, to use the American term, a sharecropper, but a bit like a sort of peasant farmer. We do in Europe, where you don't own your land, you're allowed to farm it, you have to give a certain amount to the person that does own the land, and you're largely entirely beholden to their goodwill to survive. And I think that's where I think we should be using competition regulators and investigations to improve this situation. So that's why I think there are two important tracks here. And in Europe, that's being approached through the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act. In UK, with online harms and an investigation from the CMA, and other competition investigations around the world too. There's how they behave, content they serve, are they being ethical? And then there is their business practices, and are those business models now anti-competitive? And do they merit intervention? And I think a lot of regulators increasingly think yes, they do.
Thank you, Damien. Christos, would you like to add something, please?
Yeah, first of all, sorry for insisting, but I do want to repeat that the way that Greece has handled the COVID-19 crisis, and that includes our vaccine process, we are doing extremely well compared to the other European member states, and in regard to the vaccines that were available to Greece. So in that case, it's something that you cannot really go against to. Now, if the EU had more vaccines, and Greece had more vaccines as well, that would be a message of being able to go the process much more quickly. Allow me to say though that Greece is comparably a small country, even for European standards. So it would be much more difficult for a country of the size of Greece to negotiate on its own with the pharmaceutical companies for its share of the vaccines if it was outside the EU. So yes, Greece is doing extremely well regarding the vaccine process. And in fact, if you see, it's among the 3 first in the ranking in the EU. Now, I assume that your point about 5G has to do exclusively with Huawei. We do have, since a couple of months ago, 5G services in a few parts of Greece, mostly the Athens area, and it is expanding very quickly. Obviously, there are issues that have to do with strategic decisions about the company that you did mention. Not only for Greece, but for many countries across the world. Our intention, though, as a government, because we do believe that having full access to cheap and fast internet is extremely important if you want to be competitive at a global stage, is to see how we can extend these services to most parts of the country. And I do repeat, please take into account that Greece has many islands and many mountainous remote areas. So it's extremely important for us to give quick and cheap access even to the most remote island of the country.